Amir was driving home from work when his phone rang. The moment he heard his sister's voice, he knew something was terribly wrong. Zara was crying so hard she could barely speak. Between sobs, she managed to tell him that their mother had fallen in the kitchen and wouldn't wake up. Amir's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as his heart started racing. He told Zara to call an ambulance immediately and promised he would meet them at the hospital. The drive felt endless. Every red light seemed to last forever, and his mind kept imagining the worst possible scenarios. When Amir finally reached the hospital, he ran through the entrance doors, barely noticing the people around him. The emergency department was crowded and noisy, filled with worried families and busy medical staff rushing in different directions. He spotted Zara sitting on a metal bench outside one of the rooms, her face buried in her hands. She looked so small and scared. Amir sat beside her and pulled her into a hug. She clung to him like she used to when they were children, and she had nightmares. Through her tears, Zara explained that their mother had been making tea when she suddenly collapsed. The neighbors heard the sound and broke down the door to help. A young doctor approached them holding a clipboard. She introduced herself as Dr. Layla Hassan and asked them to follow her to a quieter corner. Her voice was calm and professional, but Amir could see concern in her eyes. She explained that their mother had suffered a stroke, which meant blood flow to part of her brain had been blocked. The next 24 hours would tell them how serious the damage was. Amir felt like the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. His mother had always been the strongest person he knew. She raised him and Zara alone after their father passed away years ago. The thought of losing her was unbearable. Dr. Hassan allowed them to see their mother, but warned them that she looked different with all the machines attached to her. When Amir entered the room, his breath caught in his throat. His mother lay completely still on the white hospital bed, her face pale and peaceful like she was simply sleeping. But the beeping monitors and tubes told a different story. Zara started crying again, and Amir felt his own eyes burning with tears he was trying to hold back. He needed to be strong for his sister. As evening approached, the hospital grew quieter. Zara was exhausted from crying and worry. Amir convinced her to go home, get some rest, and bring fresh clothes in the morning. She didn't want to leave, but he promised to call her immediately if anything changed. After Zara left, Amir pulled the uncomfortable plastic chair closer to his mother's bed and sat down. The room felt cold and sterile, filled only with the steady beeping of the heart monitor and the soft hiss of the oxygen machine. He held his mother's hand gently, hoping she could somehow feel that he was there. Hours passed slowly. Amir tried to stay alert, but exhaustion was creeping in. Around midnight, he heard the door open. Dr. Hassan entered quietly, checking the monitors and making notes on her chart. She seemed surprised to see him still there. Most family members went home at night, she said softly. Amir explained he couldn't leave his mother alone. Something in his voice must have touched her because she paused in her work and really looked at him. She could see the fear and tiredness written all over his face. Dr. Hassan asked if he had eaten anything. Amir realized he hadn't had food since lunch, but he didn't feel hungry. She disappeared for a few minutes and returned with 2 cups of coffee from the staff room. She handed one to him and said that staying strong for his mother meant taking care of himself too. They stood together in the dim light, sipping the bitter hospital coffee. Amir asked her about strokes, about recovery, about hope. She answered each question honestly but kindly, never making promises she couldn't keep, but never taking away hope either. Her presence in that lonely room brought him a strange sense of comfort. For the first time since getting Zara's phone call, Amir felt like, maybe, just maybe, they would get through this terrible night. Dr. Hassan's gentle manner and the way she explained things made the medical nightmare feel a little less frightening. Even though the hardest hours still lay ahead, the night grew darker and colder. Amir sat in the uncomfortable chair, his eyes fixed on his mother's face, watching for any sign of movement. Every small sound made his heart jump. The machines continued their steady beeping, creating a rhythm that filled the silence. He tried to pray, tried to think positive thoughts, but fear kept creeping back into his mind. What would he and Zara do without their mother? She was the center of their world, the person who held everything together. Around 2 in the morning, everything changed. The heart monitor suddenly started beeping frantically, the sound piercing through the quiet hospital floor. Amir jumped to his feet, panic flooding through him. His mother's body seemed to be moving strangely, and he didn't know what to do. He ran to the door, shouting for help. Within seconds, Dr. Hassan appeared with 2 nurses running behind her. She took one look at the monitors and immediately started giving orders in a firm, controlled voice that was completely different from her earlier gentle tone. One of the nurses asked Amir to step outside. He didn't want to leave, but another nurse gently guided him out and closed the door. Through the small window, he could see Dr. Hassan and her team working quickly around his mother's bed. The medical equipment, the urgent movements, the serious faces all terrified him. He felt completely helpless. Zara called, woken by some instinct that something was wrong. Amir tried to keep his voice steady as he told her what was happening, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. 1 hour passed. It felt like 10. Amir paced back and forth in the corridor, his mind racing with terrible thoughts. Other families in nearby rooms stared at him with sympathy in their eyes. They understood his pain because they were living their own versions of it. Finally, the door opened, and Dr. Hassan stepped out. Her face was tired, and there were small beads of sweat on her forehead. She pulled off her gloves and walked toward him slowly. Amir held his breath, preparing himself for the worst news. But Dr. Hassan gave him a small, tired smile. His mother was stable again. They had managed to control the episode, but it had been close, too close. She explained in simple terms what had happened, how his mother's brain was fighting hard but the stroke had been severe. The next few hours remained critical. Amir felt his legs go weak with relief. He leaned against the wall, trying to steady himself. Dr. Hassan told him he could go back inside, but she stayed near the nurse's station to monitor the situation closely. When Amir returned to the room, he barely made it to the chair before his emotions overwhelmed him. The fear, the exhaustion, the relief all came crashing down at once. His hands started trembling, and he couldn't stop them. He felt like he was falling apart, and his mother needed him to be strong. What kind of son was he if he couldn't even keep himself together? Dr. Hassan must have been watching through the window because she came back into the room quietly. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, observing him with understanding in her eyes. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled another chair from the corner of the room and placed it right next to his. She sat down, maintaining a professional distance, but close enough that he didn't feel alone anymore. The silence between them felt comfortable, not awkward. After a few minutes, she spoke softly. She told him that what he was feeling was completely normal. Fear wasn't weakness. She had seen the strongest people break down in hospital rooms, and there was no shame in it. She shared that she had lost her own father to a stroke when she was in medical school. She understood the helplessness, the terror of watching someone you love slip away while doctors worked on them. That experience had changed her life and made her choose neurology as her specialty. Amir looked at her, really seeing her for the first time beyond just being his mother's doctor. She was young, probably around his age, with kind eyes that had clearly seen a lot of pain but hadn't become cold because of it. He started to speak, but his voice cracked. She waited patiently until he could continue. He admitted he was terrified of being alone in this room, watching his mother, not knowing if each breath would be her last. Dr. Hassan nodded slowly. Then she said something he would never forget. She looked directly at him and spoke in a gentle but firm voice that somehow made the terrifying room feel safer. "If you're staying in this room, stay beside me." It wasn't a romantic gesture or anything inappropriate. It was simply one human being offering another human being the comfort of presence during the darkest hours. She stayed there beside him for the rest of her shift, occasionally checking monitors, making notes, but mostly just being there, so he wouldn't face the fear alone. Morning light slowly filled the hospital room, bringing with it a sense of hope. Amir had barely slept, But having Dr. Hassan nearby through those dark hours had made all the difference. Around 7 in the morning, something beautiful happened. His mother's fingers moved slightly. It was such a small movement that Amir thought he had imagined it. But then her eyelids fluttered and slowly opened. She looked confused and tired, but she was awake. Amir felt tears rolling down his cheeks as he gently squeezed her hand. Dr. Hassan immediately started checking his mother's responses, asking simple questions, testing her reactions. His mother couldn't speak clearly yet, but she could blink and move her eyes. "It was a good sign, Doctor," Hassan explained with genuine happiness in her voice. The storm had passed. However, she was careful to explain that this was just the beginning. Recovery from a stroke was a long journey. His mother would need weeks, possibly months, of intensive therapy to regain her strength and abilities. Some functions might return fully, others might not. There were no guarantees. Zara arrived shortly after with fresh clothes and food. When she saw their mother awake, she burst into tears of joy and relief. The three of them held hands around the hospital bed, forming a circle of love and support. Dr. Hassan watched them from the doorway with a soft smile before quietly leaving to give them privacy. Over the following days, their mother was moved to the intensive care unit where she could be monitored more closely. The initial danger had passed, but she remained weak and unable to do basic things for herself. Amir visited the hospital every day, sometimes twice a day, juggling his work responsibilities with being there for his family. His boss was understanding, but Amir knew he couldn't keep taking time off indefinitely. Zara was still in college and couldn't manage everything alone. The stress of managing both worlds was exhausting. During these visits, Amir often ran into Dr. Hassan. She always took time to stop and explain how his mother was progressing, what the therapy would involve, what they should expect in the coming weeks. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after that terrible night, Amir brought coffee to the hospital. He had noticed Dr. Hassan often worked double shifts and rarely took proper breaks. He found her in the doctor's lounge, looking tired and reviewing patient files. When he offered her the coffee, she looked surprised but accepted it gratefully. They ended up sitting together in the hospital cafeteria, a noisy place filled with the smell of food and disinfectant. But somehow, in that chaos, they found a moment of peace. Their conversation flowed naturally. Dr. Hassan shared more about her father's illness and how helpless she had felt despite being in medical school. She had promised herself that if she became a doctor, she would never forget what families go through. She would treat not just the patient, but also care about the loved ones suffering alongside them. Amir found himself opening up about his fears. He admitted he was scared of not being strong enough to handle everything. His mother had always been their rock, and now he had to be that person for his family. What if he failed them? Dr. Hassan listened without judging. She told him something that stuck with him. Strength wasn't about never being afraid or never breaking down. Real strength was continuing to show up even when you were terrified. Even when you felt like giving up. She had seen that strength in him during that long night in the hospital room. He had every right to fall apart, but he had stayed. That was what mattered. Her words brought him comfort he didn't know he needed. They talked about other things too, moving away from the heavy topics. Dr. Hassan mentioned she loved old poetry, especially the works of Rumi and Ghalib. Amir was surprised because he also enjoyed poetry, something he rarely shared with people. They discovered they both loved the same poets, the same verses about hope and resilience. It felt strange to be discussing poetry in a hospital cafeteria, but it also felt completely right. For a brief moment, they weren't doctor and patient's family. They were just two people connecting over shared interests. As weeks passed, their conversations became something Amir looked forward to. Dr. Hassan was no longer just his mother's doctor. She had become someone he could talk to, someone who understood what he was going through without him having to explain everything. He found himself thinking about her gentle smile, her patient way of explaining things, how she made time for people, even when she was exhausted. It was different from anything he had felt before. This growing connection born from shared vulnerability and understanding in the middle of medical crisis and healing. 3 weeks after the stroke, Amir's mother was finally stable enough to be transferred to a rehabilitation facility. The doctors explained she would spend at least 2 months there, learning to walk again, working on her speech, rebuilding strength in her weakened limbs. It was hard watching his mother struggle with simple tasks that she used to do without thinking. Getting dressed, holding a spoon, forming clear words, everything required tremendous effort now. But she was determined, and that determination gave Amir and Zara hope. Amir created a routine. Every morning before work, he would stop by the rehabilitation center to have breakfast with his mother. Then he would rush to his architecture firm, try to focus on designing buildings and meeting clients, though his mind often wandered to the hospital. After work, he would return to spend the evening helping his mother with exercises, reading to her, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence. Zara would come after her college classes. Together, they became their mother's support system, just as she had always been theirs. The exhaustion was real, though. Amir was running on very little sleep, juggling work deadlines with family responsibilities. His colleagues noticed he had lost weight and looked tired all the time. But he couldn't stop. His family needed him. One evening, after a particularly difficult therapy session where his mother had broken down crying from frustration, Amir decided to drive back to the main hospital. He wanted to drop off some thank you cards and chocolates for the nursing staff who had taken such good care of his mother during those critical first days. The evening shift was just beginning when he arrived. He distributed the gifts and had lovely conversations with nurses who remembered his mother and were happy to hear about her progress. As he was leaving, he literally bumped into someone, turning the corner. It was Dr. Hassan. She was just finishing her shift, and she looked absolutely exhausted. Her usual neat appearance was slightly disheveled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She smiled when she recognized him, but he could see the tiredness behind her smile. Without really thinking about it, Amir suggested they grab dinner. She hesitated, mentioning she should probably just go home and sleep. But Amir insisted. She had been there for him during his hardest time. The least he could do was buy her a decent meal. She finally agreed, and they walked to a small restaurant near the hospital. It was nothing fancy. Just a quiet place, with good simple food. They ordered and settled into a corner booth, away from the noise of the main dining area. For the first time, they talked about things that had nothing to do with hospitals or illness. Dr. Hassan shared stories about medical school, the funny incidents that happened despite the serious environment, how she and her classmates once accidentally locked themselves in a storage room during finals week. Amir talked about his work as an architect, how he loved designing spaces that made people feel safe and comfortable. He shared his dream of one day designing a community center in his old neighborhood, where he grew up. They discovered they had more in common than poetry. Both loved old movies, especially the classic films from the 70s and 80s. Both enjoyed long walks but rarely found time for them. Both had complicated relationships with their extended families who meant well but didn't always understand their choices. The conversation flowed easily, and Amir found himself genuinely laughing for the first time in weeks. It felt good to talk about normal things, to remember that life existed beyond hospital walls and medical emergencies. Dr. Hassan admitted something that surprised him. She said she rarely allowed herself to get personally involved with patients or their families. It was a boundary doctors learned to maintain for their own mental health. But something about that night in the hospital room had affected her deeply. Watching him stay by his mother's side, seeing his raw fear and determination, it had reminded her why she became a doctor in the first place. She thanked him for that reminder. Amir felt his heart skip a beat. He confessed that he couldn't imagine having gone through those terrible days without her support. Yes, she was an excellent doctor. But it was more than that. Her presence, her kindness, the way she treated his mother with dignity and his family with respect, it had made an unbearable situation slightly more bearable. He realized he was saying more than he intended, letting his feelings show more than was probably appropriate. There was a moment of silence between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence where both people are thinking the same thing but neither knows quite how to say it. Dr. Hassan looked at her watch and mentioned she should probably head home. They paid the bill and walked back to the hospital parking lot. Under the streetlights, she turned to him and said she was really glad he had suggested dinner. She hoped they could do it again sometime, maybe when things were less stressful for both of them. Amir agreed immediately, probably too quickly, which made her laugh softly. As they parted ways and headed to their separate cars, Amir realized something had shifted. What started as a doctor-patient relationship, what grew into mutual respect and understanding during a crisis, was now becoming something different, something neither of them had expected or planned for. But it felt right. Like the best things in life that happen when you're not looking for them. 6 months passed, and they were good months filled with steady progress. Amir's mother worked hard in rehabilitation, and her determination paid off. She regained most of her mobility, though she still walked with a slight limp and used a cane for support. Her speech improved dramatically. She could hold conversations, laugh at jokes, and even scold Amir and Zara when they fussed over her too much. The doctors were impressed with her recovery. She was moved back home with arrangements for a therapist to visit 3 times a week. Life slowly returned to a new normal. Amir went back to working regular hours at his firm. Zara continued her studies. Their mother insisted on doing as much as she could by herself, refusing to be treated like she was fragile. She started cooking again. Simple meals at first, then gradually more complex dishes. The smell of her homemade biryani filling the house again brought tears to everyone's eyes. It felt like a victory. Like they had fought a war and won, even though the battle had left its marks. Through all these months, Amir thought about Dr. Hassan often. He had her phone number from medical follow-ups, but he never found the courage to use it for anything personal. He would pick up his phone, type out a message, then delete it. What would he even say? He wasn't sure if what he felt was real or just gratitude mixed with the emotional intensity of that difficult time. Maybe she had just been doing her job. Maybe he had imagined the connection between them. Then one day, Amir saw a poster at his workplace about a charity medical camp being organized by the city hospital. They needed volunteers to help with registration and coordination. Without overthinking it, he signed up. The camp was held on a Saturday at a community center in a less privileged neighborhood. Amir arrived early and was assigned to help set up chairs and organize patient files. The place was crowded with families waiting to see doctors for free checkups. Halfway through the morning, Amir looked up from his registration table and saw her. Dr. Hassan was there with other doctors, wearing a simple white coat, examining patients with the same gentle attention he remembered. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and her face immediately broke into a bright smile. She waved at him, and he waved back, his heart suddenly beating faster. When she finished with her current patient, she made her way over to his table. They greeted each other like old friends, though there was a slight awkwardness too, the kind that comes when people haven't spoken in a while, but have thought about each other often. She asked immediately about his mother. Amir told her about the amazing recovery, how his mother was doing things they feared she might never do again. Dr. Hassan's face lit up with genuine happiness. She said she always believed his mother would do well because she had a strong family supporting her. An idea struck Amir. He asked if Dr. Hassan would like to meet his mother. She had asked about her several times, wanting to thank her properly. Dr. Hassan seemed touched by the invitation. She checked her schedule, and they arranged for her to visit the following week. When Amir told his mother that Dr. Hassan was coming to visit, she became emotional. She insisted on cooking special food, on making the house perfect. Zara teased that their mother seemed more excited about this visit than when relatives came. The day of the visit arrived. Amir was nervous for reasons he couldn't fully explain. Dr. Hassan arrived in the afternoon, bringing flowers and a book of inspirational poems. When his mother saw her, she immediately stood up, leaning on her cane, and pulled the young doctor into a heartfelt embrace. There were tears in both women's eyes. His mother held Dr. Hassan's hands and spoke from her heart, thanking her for saving her life, for being kind to her children during the scariest time of their lives. Dr. Hassan said she was just doing her job, but anyone could see she was deeply moved by the gratitude. They sat together, drinking tea and eating the snacks his mother had prepared. Zara joined them, and the conversation was warm and full of laughter. His mother shared stories about Amir as a child, embarrassing him in front of Dr. Hassan, which made everyone laugh. It felt comfortable. Like Dr. Hassan belonged there with them, not as a doctor but as someone who had become part of their story. After the visit, Amir walked Dr. Hassan to her car. The afternoon sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. They stood by her car, neither wanting the moment to end. Zara's words from earlier echoed in his mind. His sister had whispered teasingly that he should properly thank the doctor, with a meaningful look that made her intentions clear. Amir took a deep breath and gathered his courage. He asked Dr. Hassan if she would like to have coffee with him sometime. Not as a doctor, and not as a patient's family member, just as two people who had met during a difficult time and discovered they enjoyed each other's company. His heart was pounding as he waited for her answer. Dr. Hassan smiled. That same gentle smile he had first seen in the dim hospital room 6 months ago. She said yes. She would like that very much. She admitted she had hoped he would call all these months, but understood why he hadn't. The boundaries between doctor and patient's family were complicated, but enough time had passed now. And she believed they had both felt something real that night, when she sat beside him in the hospital room. Sometimes, she said thoughtfully, the darkest moments in life lead us to unexpected light. Sometimes the connections we make during crisis turn out to be the most genuine because they're formed when all pretenses are stripped away and people see each other's true hearts. They made plans to meet for coffee that weekend. As Dr. Hassan drove away, Amir stood in his driveway feeling happier than he had in a long time. He went back inside to find his mother and Zara looking at him with knowing smiles. His mother called him over, took his hand, and told him that Dr. Hassan was a wonderful person. She could see that something special was beginning between them, and she gave her blessing and her hopes that it would grow into something beautiful. That weekend, Amir and Dr. Hassan met at a quiet cafe. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. They discovered more shared dreams, more common ground. They laughed about how they met, acknowledging it wasn't a typical romantic beginning. But perhaps, they agreed, the best love stories don't start in typical ways. They start in moments of truth, in shared vulnerability, in the simple act of sitting beside someone during their darkest night and choosing to stay. As they planned their next meeting, both understood that what began in a hospital room filled with fear and beeping machines had transformed into something precious. A chance at happiness, born from compassion, courage, and the beautiful unpredictability of life.